먹는 햄버거 육류가 아니라 실제 DNA를 재가공해서 만든 햄버거를 만드는 즉 육류를 만든다는 그 회사를 소개를 할 거고요. 회사 이름은 마든 매도입니다. 바이오 3D 프린팅 기술을 활용해서 식용 육류 제작 기술을 가진 회사로서 비즈니스 개발 총괄 본부장인 사라 스클라식이 발표를 할 예정이고요. 바이오 3D 프린팅 기술로 세포 조직을 배양하여 육류를 생산하는 기술력을 지니고 있습니다. 또한 사라 스클라식은 하버드대 바이오 전공을 했고 이 분야에서 남다른 통찰을 가지고 있어서 조금 더 인사이트 있는 견해를 들을 수 있지 않을까 기대를 하고 있습니다. 그럼 사람을 그대로 모시도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
Hey, thank you. I'm very glad they put me on after lunch because hopefully now that everybody just ate, you'll be interested in the future of food. So at Modern Meadow, we're creating a new category of biomaterials made through tissue engineering. So what that means is we take living cells, and from those living cells we build tissues, organic structures, to make products that can be used in everyday life. So we can do this because we're the world experts in tissue engineering. Our scientific team, prior to founding Modern Meadow, founded a company called Organovo. Organovo is a pioneer in regenerative medicine. Currently, what Organovo does is they make tissue constructs, so small amounts of functional organic tissue, living tissue, like little bits of liver, which are used by pharmaceutical companies to test and discover new drugs. So we can do this because our team co-invented bioprinting. Now, just to explain in brief what bioprinting is, it's the 3D printing of living cells to make more complex tissues. What you do is you start with living cells, you print them onto a 3D matrix, like a gel, and if you give the cells the right environmental cues and the right nutrients, they can fuse and form more complex tissues, eventually, potentially whole organs, like hearts, kidneys, or livers. Now eventually, this is what Organovo aims to do, to make whole organs for transplantation into humans for medical applications. Now when this happens, when we can print entire human organs on demand for medical use, it's going to be one of the most transformative things that medicine has ever seen. But beyond medicine, tissue engineering has many more potential benefits. There are serious problems in the world that could be impacted if we had the ability to grow tissue as desired, reliably, and at large scale. The world consumes billions of pounds of animal products every year. So we thought to ourselves, if we can grow human body parts, why not grow animal products, like leather and meat? This is why we founded Modern Meadow. At Modern Meadow, we're developing fundamentally new techniques in tissue engineering, and we're using this to grow leather and meat without harming animals or the environment. Now, you might not think of food as a major global problem in need of a technological solution, but it is. Our current animal production methods are unsustainable, inefficient, and inhumane. You might not be aware of this because livestock production takes place by definition where people don't live. Slaughterhouses and factory farms are often located in remote areas that are hidden from view. And so us, the end consumers, are often unaware of just how resource intensive and harmful current animal production methods are. This is all a bit abstract. It might be a little difficult to think about. So to put the cost of livestock production into perspective, let's take a look at a typical meal. So what does it take in terms of energy and resources to produce the meat that goes into a hamburger? Well, the real cost is a lot higher than you might think. First off, food. You have to feed a cow for several years before you can kill the cow and eat it yourself. And the feed conversion ratio, that is the conversion of feedstock like corn into meat for beef, is pretty much the lowest ratio in all of agriculture. It's one of the most inefficient ways to produce food. It takes over 24 pounds of feed, like corn, to produce 1 pound of meat. There's also an enormous cost to the environment. Each burger has a contribution to global warming on the order of about 8 to 13 pounds of carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide equivalent, like methane. So livestock are an enormous producer of methane gas, which is actually a much more significant in the short-term contributor to global warming than carbon dioxide. Meat production also requires an enormous amount of the Earth's supply of fresh water. So it takes over 340 gallons of water to produce one hamburger. The supply chain for meat is also incredibly long and inefficient. So energy and resources are needed to transport livestock 1,500 miles to the slaughterhouse, to the store, and to your plate. And then there's costs that we don't see that are sort of harder to add up, but just as serious. Intensive factory farming requires undesirable interventions that have negative consequences. Factory farms use hormones to keep cows growing quickly. Cows are given unnecessary antibiotics to make them gain weight in these unhealthy factory farm conditions. The unnecessary use of antibiotics for livestock leads to the evolution of antibiotic-resistant pathogens, which kill thousands of people every year. But where there's a big problem, there's also a big opportunity. Leather and meat are enormous global markets. Around the world, we use 300 million tons of meat every year. That's a $700 billion global market that's fast approaching $1 trillion per year market as the world's population grows and people eat more meat. We use 18 billion square feet of leather every year, and that's a $63 billion global industry. Now, this enormous amount of animal products that we use does not come cheaply. It takes a heavy toll on our planetary resources. Globally, we now maintain a herd of 60 billion land animals to supply our animal products, our meat, our leather, our eggs, our dairy. Over the next few decades, as the world's population expands from 7 billion to 10 billion people, we're going to be using a lot more animal products, and this is going to require that we nearly double our animal herds, from 60 billion animals to 100 billion animals by 2050. The problem is we're running out of room. So tending our global livestock herds takes a major toll on the planet. Animals are not just raw materials, they're living beings that need to be fed, that emit gas, that consume planetary resources alongside of us. Already, livestock is one of the largest consumers of land. So 1/3 of all the ice-free land on the planet is used for livestock production. That's a lot of room. Of our global freshwater supply, 8% is used for livestock production. And livestock production is one of the biggest contributors to global warming. Anywhere from 18% to 51%, depending on which estimates you're using. But no matter whose numbers you use, it's tremendously high. Now, in addition to these resources that livestock use, the feedstock used to feed animals is a really unnecessary diversion of food that could be feeding people. The majority of the crops that we grow, 66% of all the crops that we grow, corn, wheat, soybeans, are used to feed animals, not people, because we have to maintain this enormous global herd. So imagine how much more food there would be in the world if the majority of the food that we already grow could feed people, not animals. In addition to all of these resources that are being consumed by livestock production, once you put millions of animals together in close conditions in factory farms, you create the opportunity for new diseases to evolve. We've seen this in recent years with swine flu and avian flu. So diseases are evolving because livestock are in close proximity to each other. And then these diseases, these new diseases, can jump the species barrier and infect humans and kill people. So clearly we can't continue what we're doing, and we certainly can't double these numbers because we just don't have the resources on the planet to do it. This path we're on is putting the environment, public health, and food safety at risk. Unfortunately, this is where we're headed. And in fact, it's only going to get worse in recent years, I'm sorry to say. The demand for meat is rising. There's two main reasons for this. The first is that the global population is growing very quickly. So by 2050, we're expected to add 3 billion people to the planet. And as you can see from this chart here, I believe these are United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates. As the population grows, so does meat consumption. It doesn't matter which type of meat you're talking about. The global forecast is for an increasing demand for animal protein. And then the second reason that we're going to see a lot more demand for meat in the future is the improved standard of living in many parts of the world. So as countries industrialize and become wealthier, people's diets tend to change. They tend to adopt a more meat-heavy, typically a Western diet. And as you can see in this chart here on the left, as people's diet increases and they have a higher caloric intake and a higher protein intake, the majority of those new protein calories that they're getting come from animal products. So that's the preferred food that people would like. Now that's great for people. It's tough for animals and for our ability to produce animal products to meet this demand. So which countries and which populations in the coming years will be eating more meat? Well, again, these are United Nations estimates. So this chart shows the increasing demand in the world for poultry meat in the next 15 years. Red is bad. Red means high demand. The charts for other types of meat like beef or chicken or pork look very similar. So this is just an example, but it holds true across the board. And as you can see, the demand crunch is going to be highest in parts of Asia, the Middle East, and sort of Central and parts of South America. But notably, you can see Korea here is going to have one of the largest resource constraints. Now, the reason that a lot of these countries are going to be seeing this resource problem, this inability to meet the demand for animal products, is because the populations in these areas is growing. The countries are getting wealthier, so they need to feed more people, higher quality food, but in general, they don't have the land and the resources like fresh